Hari Madhava Kunjabihari Jayom Vishnu Pataramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaura Premanandi. So as you can see, we're on class number 9. It says flow because the plan has been and continuing right now. Can you see? Not so well, huh? No? Okay. The plan has been to give kind of like a 35,000 foot overview picture of the flow of the events in the first 6 cantos of Bhagavatam. Not detail, but main sequence of events and flow of events and exchanges between certain personalities in these stories. So the 8th class was discussing Dhruva. You know who is Dhruva Maharaj? No idea. Dhruva was a little younger than you. He was 5 years old when he achieved spiritual perfection. It's not where he started. He started being really angry and vengeful because his stepmother means not his real mother, but his father was a king. And his father had 2 queens, and there was another queen besides his mother. He was the firstborn son. He was due to become the king. Firstborn son becomes the next king. But the second queen was younger, and the king had more, attraction for the second queen, and she was a really envious lady and nasty. And so when his younger brother was sitting on the father's lap, little Dhruva, 5-year-old boy, also wanted to sit on his father's lap, and his stepmother stopped him and said, "Get down." And saying that without the whole story, she insulted him very badly, like really badly. And he looked at his father, like, "Help." And his father said nothing. Nothing. So he burst out in tears, ran from the palace, went to find his mother, cried and cried and cried. His mother heard everything from the people that were in the palace, what happened. She felt pain, the pain of her son having been insulted like that. And she felt helpless because she was not in the favor of the king. This other queen was in the favor of the king. She really couldn't do anything. So what she did was she spoke to him about living by a higher principle. If you adopt the mood of getting back at your stepmother, that get back mentality is going to hurt you, Dhruva. If you wish ill upon others, that comes back to you. So don't do that. Instead, take shelter of Vishnu. I'm not going to tell you, what he wanted was a kingdom better than his father, and better than his father's father, and better than his father's father. So there. He was a Kshatriya spirited little boy, 5 years old, but had that spirit. And so his mother said, if you go to Vishnu, you can get that kingdom. And then she, his mother, started describing how Vishnu gave to your great-grandfather Swayambhuva Manu, rule of the universe. And his father, Lord Brahma, was able to create the universe by the power of Vishnu. So you want a kingdom, that's where to go. Go to Vishnu. He can help you achieve anything. So Dhruva thought about it and said, very well, how do I find Vishnu? And his mother said, I don't know. The sages, they go to the forest, they somehow find Vishnu. He said, very well, I'm leaving right now for the forest. And he left. Just off into the forest. And he didn't find Vishnu. He found trees and mosquitoes and birds and snakes and animals and all kinds of flowers and things. But he didn't see Vishnu. So good news for him. Narada found him. Narada Muni, you know who is Narada Muni, right? No? Here's Narada Muni. Here's a picture of Narada Muni. He plays a Vena. He's a renunciate, and he's a great devotee of the Lord. So Narada Muni found him, and he tested him to see, how determined is he? He saw he was really determined, so he gave him teachings how to achieve spiritual perfection. There's the very detailed explanation. Dhruva went to the forest. He went to Madhuvan in Vrindavan, where Narada told him to go. And in 6 months, this austerity, that very, 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 very severe austerities, most people would die with the kind of austerities he did. But he was really gifted, and Lord Vishnu came and told Dhruva, you'll get your father's kingdom and rule for 36,000 years, because this is a different age. Satya Yuga, people live for a long time. At the end of your life, you'll achieve a special planet. You wanted this special kingdom? It's yours. It's just waiting for you 36,000 years later. So he went there at the end of his life. A airplane or Vimana descended from Dhruva-loka, or what you can see in the sky, this pole star. Same thing. That's where Dhruva went. And the agents of Vishnu took him there. His mother also went there. And it was a really celebrated special event. And that's what we heard in the previous chapter. So now we're moving on into the next chapter, which is chapter 13. Starting with chapter 13. But the connection between 12 and 13 is right here. After Dhruva went to the spiritual realm, Narada Muni thought, well, this is really very wonderful. Dhruva was a really good disciple. And he went to a place where the Prachetas were performing a sacrifice. And I'm just going to read those verses. And he started speaking about how wonderful is Dhruva. I'll just read. After observing the glories of Dhruva Maharaj, the great sage Narada, playing his Vena, that musical instrument there is his Vena, he went to the sacrificial arena of the Prachetas and very happily chanted the following 3 verses. He's happy because when a disciple does very well, just like when a son does very well, the father is really happy. So when the disciple does really well, the spiritual master is very happy. This is what Narada said. Simply by the influence of his spiritual advancement and powerful austerity. Dhruva Maharaj, the son of Suniti, who was devoted to her husband, acquired an exalted position not possible to attain for even the so-called Vedantists or strict followers of Vedic principles, not to speak of ordinary human beings. Dhruva achieved perfection. Dhruva Maharaj attained an exalted position. Whoops, one more. The great sage Narada continued, just see how Dhruva Maharaj, aggrieved by the harsh words of his stepmother, went into the forest at the age of only 5 years, and under my direction underwent austerity. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unconquerable, Dhruva Maharaj defeated him with the specific qualifications possessed by the Lord's devotees. And the third, Dhruva attained an exalted position at the age of only 5, after undergoing austerity for 6 months. Alas, a great Kshatriya cannot achieve such a position even after undergoing austerities for many, many years. So Dhruva was in the fast lane. He was Superboy. And Narada is very much appreciating. So there's a little picture here of when Dhruva grew up. He married, he became a king, and he had 2 queens. One's name was Brahmi, and there were 2 sons, Kalpa and Vatsara. And he had a second queen named Ila, and his eldest son of the 3 was Utkala, and he had a daughter whose name is not mentioned. So when Dhruva passed on the kingdom to his eldest son, Utkala, he said, no thanks, Dad, I want to become a renunciate. So he went to the forest like Dhruva had gone and was cultivating self-realization. So the younger son, Vatsara, became the next king. So this is Dhruva and the descendants of Dhruva. Then comes, here you see in this painting, that's Sutta Goswami on our left. And in front of him are sages who had gathered at Naimisharanya, the one with the long white beard in the lower right corner. That's Shaunaka Rishi. So Sutta speaking. Sutta continued to speak to all the rishis headed by Shaunaka and said, after hearing Maitreya Rishi describe Dhruva Maharaj's ascent to Lord Vishnu's abode, Vidura became very much enlightened in devotional emotion and inquired for Maitreya as follows. Now Maitreya, this is a story within a story within a story. So Sutta is telling those sages about a discussion that took place between these 2. On our right, wearing white, because he was a householder, that's Vidura. And on our left, sitting in a little cave there, that's Maitreya. And this goes back to the third canto Bhagavatam, a discussion between the 2. I mean, for those that may not remember, Vidura is one of 3 brothers. The eldest brother was Dhritarashtra, who was blind. The second brother was Pandu, who became the king, and the Pandavas became the next rulers. And the third brother, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, the third brother was Vidura. Vidura was very, very wise. At some point in time, he left Hastinapur and went on pilgrimage. And one of the places he ended up in pilgrimage was meeting Maitreya. So there's an introduction of who those personalities are. And there, on the right side, Vidura is asking many, 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 many questions. Maitreya is responding. And so, since Maitreya had narrated this whole story about Dhruva, he wanted to know, who are these Prachetas you mentioned at the end of the Dhruva story? Who are the Prachetas? Because Narada had gone to a place for sacrifice where the Prachetas were. So who are these Prachetas? To which family did they belong? Whose sons were they? And where did they perform the great sacrifices? So to answer the question, he goes to the lineage that comes from Dhruva. And one of those kings in that lineage that comes from Dhruva was King Anga. It's many generations later, but in Dhruva's lineage there was a king named Anga who was a very great king. And Anga had a son whose name was Vena. Anga's wife, Sunita. And the son was really cruel. And the maternal, that is Sunita's father, or his maternal grandfather, was death personified. It doesn't give any details, so don't ask me, how did that happen? How did somebody marry death personified? But the detail isn't there. But Vena had qualities like his maternal grandfather. So Anga was like super. He was a super king, super religious, super virtuous. So then comes the next question. See, there's Vidura again, asking Maitreya, how is this? King Anga was very gentle. He had high character and was a saintly personality and a lover of Brahminical culture. How is it that such a great soul had a bad son like Vena, because of whom he became indifferent to his kingdom and left it? So what happened? Well, here, this is, already we're at verse 21 in this chapter, so a whole lot of summary is not presented, or detail is not presented. Here's the reply, my dear Vidura. Once the great King Anga arranged to perform the great sacrifice known as Ashvamedha. Ashvamedha is, see that white horse on the left? It's a horse sacrifice. And the horse sacrifice is the horse goes into the fire and comes out, new. It's like a little young colt, a little horse. All the expert brahmanas present knew how to invite the demigods, because this is Satya Yuga. This is very, very, very early in the stage of creation. And during that yuga, when they had sacrifices to invite the demigods, they would come. They would show up. They would participate in the yajna. They would receive the fruits of the sacrifice from the hands of the performers. But they didn't come. He invited the demigods, but in spite of their efforts, no demigods participated or appeared in that sacrifice. So Anga was confused. They had all the proper offerings, all the clarified butter, all the paraphernalia. Everything was very carefully collected by the brahmanas with great faith and care. Our chanting of Vedic mantras is also not deficient in any way. This is the brahmanas saying, it's not because things weren't in order, everything was done properly. Here's the reason why. My dear priest, kindly tell me what offense I have committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares of the offerings. And the priests said, in this life we do not find any sinful activity, even within your mind. So you're not in the least offensive, but we can see that in your previous life you performed sinful activities, due to which, in spite of your having all qualifications, you have no son. So they recommended that he worship Vishnu. So Vishnu, by Karmakanda Yagya, they could have a son, or the King Anga. Worship the Supreme Lord for a son, the performer of the sacrifices. There's rituals, karmakanda rituals. One can achieve the fulfillment of your desire while propitiating Lord Vishnu. So he did that. And he had a son. And his son was given the name Vena. Vena being the grandson of death personified, because that was his death personified's daughter was the wife or the mother, the wife of Anga, and the mother of Vena. He was a very merciless person. For example, when the kids would go to play, he'd kill his classmates. They'd go out into the playground and play, and he'd kill them when he was a kid. He wasn't a nice boy. He was very, very wicked. When he grew up, he was to become the king. And as soon as he became the king, he stopped all religious performances. His father was so disgusted, he tried this way, that way to reform him. He was incorrigible. So he just left for the forest. Vena became the king. Now there's the next chapter. Vena commanded the sages, those are the two on the left, on our right, those are two sages. The one on the far right looks really disturbed. Vena said, don't worship the demigods, don't worship anybody else, just worship me. And the Brahmins were not very pleased with that idea. And so not by weapons, but by mantra, Vena was killed. And then there was a problem, because although Vena was killed because he was wicked, when there's no king or no ruler, then there was turmoil in the country. So the next chapter said, the sages, by their mystical powers, they churned the arms of Vena's dead body, and zoom, as you see from the artist's illustration, from his arms appeared two very amazing beings, Prithu and Archie. They were crowned king and queen, and the demigods, oceans, seas, and mountains each presented Maharaj Prithu with valuable gifts. That's a whole chapter summary. The male on our left side, that's Prithu, was a plenary expansion of the power of Lord Vishnu. A plenary expansion of the power of Lord Vishnu. That's called Shakti Avesh Avatar. Have you heard that term before? Shakti, you know. And Avesha means invested with. So a jiva, a living entity, invested with the power of Vishnu, called Shakti Avesh, or in a plenary expansion of the power of Vishnu, who maintains the entire universe. The particular potency of Vishnu that he had was ruling potency, Palana Shakti. So it's well known in the Vedic texts. Prithu is an incarnation, born in a very interesting way, churning the arms of Vena. And he appeared, not an ordinary kind of an appearance. And he's the Archie, his consort or wife, was an expansion of the goddess of fortune, who was never separated from the Lord. The male, this is the sages pronouncing, the male will be able to expand his reputation throughout the world. His name will be Prithu. The female has such beautiful teeth and beautiful qualities that she'll actually beautify the ornaments she wears. Her name will be Archie. So the two appeared. The celestial beings, as you see on the sky there, they all offered their benedictions and prayers because it's a form of the Lord. And next chapter, moving along. Professional reciters They did horoscopes, and they were singing the glories of the future acts of King Prithu. So it's really nice, kind of like what happened in the first canto when Prakshit was born. The astrologers came together, and what is the son going to be like when he grows up? Only Prithu was already grown up when he appeared. So they did the charts and were singing the kind of activities he would perform. Doesn't say it as follows. Okay. Something happened. This is a summary of the next chapter, 17. There you see Prithu riding in a chariot, and over there you see a cow running from Prithu. The earth refused to supply grains to the starving citizens. Prithu Maharaj became like Anga personified and prepared to kill the earth. He said that he will personally sustain the earth's population by his mystic powers. He was a ruling potency kind of king. He was going to make sure that citizens had their requirements. This is one of the prayers. He will maintain, let's do this. Okay, this is one of the prayers. He will maintain all the demigods and the earth, equally distribute his mercy, be tolerant, supply rain, and enhance the peace of all. He will be all-knowing, yet neutral within his kingdom, the determined protector of Brahminical culture, the giver of shelter, and respectful to women. He will serve the devotees, associate with liberated souls, and chastise the impious. I think that was my doing. I mixed up this sequence. So that's now chapter 17. He's going to chastise earth for not supplying necessities to the citizens. And the citizens came appealing to the king. There you see the citizens on the right. There's King Prithu on the left with a very fancy mustache. Normally we don't see incarnations of the Lord with a mustache, but these artists wanted to do like that. So Prithu heard from them, and he began to consider what's the reason for this disturbance. And in his contemplation, he came up with the conclusion that the earth was restricting. Having arrived at a conclusion, King took up his bow and arrow and aimed them at the earth exactly like Lord Shiva, who destroys the whole world out of anger. So there's Prithu in his chariot, and there's earth in the form of a cow running for her life. You ever see a cow run? I've seen a cow run. Really, hilarious. They don't run like a horse. They don't run like a dog. They don't run like a cat. They don't run like a cow. It's really awkward. But they run. So she was running. When the earth saw that King Prithu was taking his bow and arrow to kill her, she began to flee exactly like a deer, which runs very swiftly when followed by a hunter. See, there's some deer up there on the upper right. There's some deers running on the lower left. And there's a cow going to start to run away from the king. Prithu chased the earth at all places. Earth could not escape Prithu. She turned to Prithu in helplessness. So she offered many prayers, and they're very, very beautiful prayers, and pleads to the king to not kill her. But Prithu wasn't satisfied. He doesn't want to kill her. He wants the necessities that earth is supposed to supply. So she explained why she was in her situation. Please control your anger. Great sages have prescribed proper methods. By faithfully following proper methods, one can get desired results. And you don't go by the proper methods and will be successful. I hid the seeds because they were being used by non-devotees, and I wasn't being protected by King Vena. Take the seeds out by method which I explained to you. So things weren't growing, there weren't rains, and there weren't seeds. And so she's going to tell him, she told him why they were hidden and how to get them. Arrange for a calf, a pot, and a milkman. That's pretty good. You got a cow, you have a calf, and a milk pot, and a milkman. Make me level. So this is what Prithu did. He leveled the earth, by which rainwater will remain on its surface. This is summarizing 9 verses in the Bhagavatam, 10 verses. So because Prithu wanted, what he did want was the necessities for the citizens. That's what the king has that concern. And earth was restricting because Venu was such a wicked king, she restricted. But now Prithu is the king, fantastic. Here's how you can get all the necessities for human society. And contrary, if you break me to pieces, how will you stop everyone from drowning in the Garbhadak ocean? The earth has a lot of living entities. And if you finish me, then people are going to be in trouble. They'll end up in the Garbhadak ocean. So that's not the best plan. This is one of her last prayers in this section. There you see earth personified in the form of a cow offering this prayer to Prithu. My dear Lord, I am also the creation of one of your energies, composed of the 3 modes of material nature. Consequently, I am bewildered by your activities. Even the activities of your devotees cannot be understood, and what to speak of your pastimes. Thus, everything appears to us to be contradictory, and wonderful. It's a nice prayer. You know, she's bewildered by his anger because she's ready to supply, so no need to be angry. Just let's do the needful procedures and all the necessities will be there because you're not the same kind of king as Vena. I'm ready to supply. Prabhupada explained like this, that as Kali Yuga progresses, production from the land will diminish. The reason is that sacrifice is not performed and the character of people becomes more degraded, and so earth restricts. Or say it the other way, when character is elevated and people perform their duties properly, earth supplies abundantly. It's one of those things that the sages were asking at the very beginning of the first Canto Bhagavatam. When Krishna was present, just by the touch of his feet upon the earth was sanctified and everything was in abundance. During Yudhishthira's time, there was such abundance. It was like that, beyond even the abundance of a heavenly realm. But after Krishna's gone, what's going to maintain that same standard? Where will religious principles be upheld and protected? They wanted to know. And so the answer that Sutta gives, the same one who's narrating this section, Sutta said, after Krishna's departure, like the sun setting on the western horizon at night, during the night of this age of Kali, brilliant as the sun moon has risen in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because at that time when they were speaking, Shukadev Goswami had just narrated the Bhagavatam for the first time. Okay, so this is Mother Earth speaking to King Prithu, and he appreciates her message, and so he does the following. This is a chapter summary. The earth in the form of a cow, fearfully surrendered to Prithu and begs him to take grains from her by milking her, or seeds at least. Prithu then transforms Swayambhuva Manu into a calf, and he becomes the milkman, and Swayambhuva Manu becomes the calf, and there's a milk pot there, and milks all the herbs and grains from the earth. The sages, demigods, daityas, residents of the upper planets, yakshas, snakes, four-legged animals, trees, and residents of earth all follow his example and fulfill their desires. So all of the things on the left, apparently that's King Prithu, and Swayambhuva Manu, looks like that's the calf person over there somewhere. Not sure how that works. And so as the cow, Mother Earth in the form of cow is delivering all these things that human society requires. Earth supplied everyone their respective food. Prithu developed affection to Earth as if she was his own daughter. Now there's some detailed explanation of Prithu leveling the earth because it was not suited for maintaining or retaining rainfall. So that's one of the things that Prithu did, along with his soldiers. In chapter 19, Prithu, this is important, Prithu is for the welfare of the citizens. So abundance is there for the citizens, but he wants further welfare for his citizens. So kings would sometimes do this. They would perform sacrifices, the benefit of which would directed to the citizens. So his plan was to perform 100 Ashwamedha Yagyas. And that made Indra nervous. Because Indra was thinking, uh-oh, if he does 100 horse sacrifices, then he may want to drive me out of the king of heaven position and take over. So he wanted to stop that 100th horse sacrifice. So Indra made himself invisible and he stole the horse. Indra did this in the 5th canto, we find also, in relation to the descent of the Ganges and so on. We'll get there later. So it says he became invisible. Here's a painting that doesn't show him invisible, but there's Indra up there on the upper right, and he's taking the horse away. And Prithu sees him and he's got his bone ready to let him have it. But then he poof, disappeared. And it was a big scene. So Lord Vishnu came to Prithu and said, you know what? You don't need to do this 100th horse sacrifice. Indra's just nervous. So you don't need this. The citizens are well provided for, well cared for. So just, don't do that 100 sacrifice. And Indra will be peaceful. So, and please forgive Indra for stealing that horse and interrupting the sacrifice. Indra recognized, as you see in the painting, there's Indra with so many eyes around his body, and coming with folded palms before King Prithu. And over on our left, that's Lord Vishnu, along with Garuda, of course. And behind King Prithu, there you see Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And you look down, there's the 4 Kumaras. And there are many assembled personalities who are witnessing all of this. And there's some very nice prayers that Indra offers to Prithu, and there's a close-up painting of Lord Vishnu extending his lotus flower to benedict the scene. And then Prithu, after receiving the words of Indra, Prithu turns and offers prayers to Lord Vishnu. And it's a whole chapter of prayers. Prithu, an incarnation, offering prayers to Lord Vishnu. Here's two of them. My dear Lord, I do not wish to have the benediction of merging into your existence, a benediction in which there is no existence of the nectarian beverage of your lotus feet. I want the benediction of at least 1,000,000 years, for thus I may be able to hear about the glories of your lotus feet from the mouths of your pure devotees. So it's not literally he wants 1,000,000 years, but he wants to hear again and again the glories of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet from the pure devotees. My dear Lord, due to your illusory energy, all living beings in this material world have forgotten their real constitutional position, and out of ignorance, they are always desirous of material happiness in the form of society, friendship, and love. Therefore, please do not ask me to take some material benefits from you, but as a father, not waiting for the son's demand, does everything for the benefit of the son, please bestow upon me whatever you think is best for me. This is a celebrated verse. It's something like what Prahlad Maharaj said to Lord Nrsingadev. It's not verbatim, but what Prahlad Maharaj said to Lord Nrsingadev, you want to offer me a benediction? Prahlad said, don't ask me to ask for anything, because between you and me, you're the master and I'm the servant, and that's it. I've not come to you or wanting from you something that be like a merchant. Vanik. You know, I do something, you give me something, and that's our relationship. No. You're the master, I'm the servant, that's it. It's not the same, but here Dhruva is saying, Prithu is saying, you're the father, and I'm the son, and the son doesn't need to ask something from father. The father knows what's best for the son, so whatever you feel is what is appropriate. Whatever's best for me, that's what's best for, that's what I want. I want whatever you want. That's a nice way of describing what love is. Love is not, you do this for me and I'll do that for you. That's business. But love is, I just serve. And if something comes from the other party, that's fine. Whatever comes from the other party, that's just fine. So now we're moving on to the next chapter. After his prayers, Prithu now turns to his citizens. He's seated on the throne. He's the king. Vishnu has come, Lord Shiva has come, Brahma has come, the Kumaras have come, so many personalities have come, and now he's addressing his citizens. Now, if you're the ruling potency, empowered person to rule the world, the whole earth planet, what are you going to say to your citizens? That's chapter 21. Always perform your duties, varnashram duties, the duties in relation to Vishnu. Do those duties, whatever is your appropriate duty, do for the Lord's pleasure. Attentively serve the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas without any offense. He's describing a very simple system of organized society according to the varnashram system. That's the social structure. And do those things for Vishnu, for the satisfaction of the Supreme. And then those that are his closest representatives, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, serve them. Serve them affectionately and attentively, and be careful to avoid offense against those representatives of Vishnu. That's a quick summary of the chapter. So now the citizens he's instructed the citizens Now they want to glorify him. And as they're doing that, there you see seated on the throne up there is these little boys, the 4 Kumaras. And they were effulgent, like suns, the suns in the sky. And immediately Prithu got down from his seat and offered you see him washing their little feet? See that water pot he has? And he's honoring them because they're brahmanas and he's a kshatriya. Sanat Kumar advised Prithu to serve the Lord in the heart to become free from desires. For one overcomes all dangers by taking shelter of his lotus feet. Now these are standard instructions you find again and again in the Bhagavatam, but here it is. This is the Kumaras. Sanat Kumar is the leading speaker, speaking to the king, Prithu. It's like a really big festival going on here. One thing after the next thing. And as charity, Prithu offers his entire kingdom to the Kumaras. Now what are they going to do with the kingdom? So they give it back to the king. But, with their blessings. Nice painting. There's the 4 Kumaras seated on a throne. And in the foreground, there's the king with his little mustache and honoring them, ready to serve them in any way they want. It wasn't just nice words, it's the way that he lived his life. And chapter 23, look at this. It's time for Prithu to leave this world. When the time comes to leave his body, Prithu Maharaj fixes his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna, practices Ashtanga Yoga, and merges the elements of his body with the totality of elements. Fixed in Krishna consciousness, he goes to Vaikuntha with Queen Archie. That first part is very, very similar to what Grandfather Bhishma did. When he was ready to leave his body, he withdrew his senses in pratyahara and fixed his mind in transcendence, and all of his life functions stopped. So the sages and kings both knew how to do all this. There you see a fire yagya in the mound right there. And there's the 2 Vimanas, one with the queen, Archie, and the other with Prithu. And off they went to the spiritual world. And then comes this, all of this is responding to the question, who are these Prachetas? Remember in the very beginning? From the Dhruva story, Narada went to where the Prachetas were doing their yagya, and the question was, who are these Prachetas? Who are they the descendants of? So all of this is to answer that. The Prachetas were born in the dynasty of Prithu, many generations later. And they, at the request of their father, they were asked to assist in producing good offspring, good citizens. So they went to the ocean to do meditation. Their meditation was underwater meditation for thousands of years, no cheating. You can't, because when you're doing meditation, the way that they were able to do in Satya Yuga, you suspend life air. And when you're underwater, you can't cheat. So, when they were ready to enter into the sea, Lord Shiva came out of the sea and spoke what's called in the Bhagavatam Rudra Gita. Like Bhagavad Gita, this is Rudra Gita. And Rudra, or Lord Shiva, or the song of Lord Shiva is called in the Bhagavatam, is really nice glorification of Vishnu. Here's a little bit of the genealogical line from Prithu. very quickly. Up there at the top, that's Prithu and Archie. And they had 5 sons that ruled the Earth planet in these different directions. There was the head, the eldest, and the emperor, the eastern, southern, western, northern region. And then the eldest son had 2 wives. And there's one of the wives, Sikandini. Those are their sons. And the second, Nabasvati, Havir Dana, that was his son, or their son, and then so on. And then, so one of the sons of, so Havir Dana, let's go back. Havir Dana is at the bottom over there. This is showing, this is the line from Prithu where the Prachetas come in. So there, Havir Dana had Havir Dani as his wife. 6 sons, one of them was Prachini Barishat. And Prachini Barishat had sons called the Prachetas. So, and that's the mystery. It's just 4 generations later from Prithu. The Prachetas were there. Now, we heard, going back to chapter 12, the Prachetas were doing a yagya. But Dhruva, remember, Dhruva had been ruling for 36,000 years. Let's do this. In the present age, life expectancy really high if you can reach 100 years. In the previous age, you just add a multiple of 10, like during Krishna's time. It's 1,000 years. During Lord Rama's time, multiple of 10, 10,000 years. And in Satya Yuga, multiple of 10, 100,000 years. So Dhruva was ruling during Satya Yuga, 36,000 years. It's like rule for 36 years. So when he left and went to the spiritual world, Narada went to a place where the Prachetas were doing a yagya. So this is, 36,000 years later. So they're in the line of Prithu. And starting tomorrow, we're going to hear some more about the Prachetas, but this is a preview for tomorrow, little chapter summary. There's Narada with the Vena across his lap. Remember the Vena, that stringed instrument? And then he's a sannyasi, but he sings names of Krishna and travels around the universe. He has a power to do that. And Narada, went to visit after visiting the Prachetas, he went to visit the father of the Prachetas. That father of Prachetas, as you see seated there, that's Prachini Barishat. His sons were the Prachetas, and that's their father, the king. And the king was a little too much involved in Karmakanda rituals. So, while the Prachetas perform austerities underwater, Narada preaches to their father, King Prachini Barishat, whose intelligence is bewildered by fruitive acts. Narada narrates the allegory of Puranjana, who lived in a city of 9 gates, or the body, because it has 9 holes, along with his queen, whose material intelligence, who kept him, the king, under her control. So, tomorrow we're going to be hearing the allegory of Puranjana. See, it's Narada's fantastic. I mean, what Narada did with Dhruva was so straightforward. First, he just tested him, said, "Look, you're just 5 years old. Great sages, powerful kings, they come to the forest. Sometimes for lifetimes they can't achieve this. So, and he gave different reasons why it wasn't a good idea. And he saw Dhruva was really determined, so he gave him bhakti. Sometimes Narada Muni, we know this, you probably know this nice story. He was traveling one time in a forested area, and he was going to a yajna, and he saw half-killed animals with arrows stuck in their bodies. Yuck, what's this? Then he saw a hunter, Magari the hunter. So he went right into the open, and all the animals that Magari was after, they ran away, and Magari said, "Who are you? You just scared away all these animals." And he said, "I'll tell you who I am, but can I just ask one thing?" "What's that?" Because he saw he was a saint, and his heart was moved. He said, "Don't half kill the animals, kill them completely." I said, "Why do you say that?" "Because they suffer." "Suffer? I never thought no one told me that before." "And what's the consequence if they suffer?" "If they suffer like that, you're going to have to suffer like that. That's the law of karma." Really? So anyway, in discussion with Magari, that was his approach to Magari. Don't half kill the animals, kill them completely, because they suffer. And you're going to have to suffer like them. So Magari, but just in Narada's association, he said, "Well, what should I do? I've half killed lots of animals." He said, "Well, first of all, I'll take care of your maintenance, but I want you to break your bow." He looked at his bow, and he looked at Narada, and looked at his bow, and looked at Narada, and he trusted Narada. He had faith just by his association. He was a forest guy. He wasn't a civilized person. But Narada's association was so powerful, he broke his bow. I got my wife to look after her. He said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you." And that's what happened. And he became a gentle person. Later, Parvat Muni came with Narada to go visit Narada's disciple, and he came running from his little cottage, and there were ants on the path, and he brushed the ants aside with his cloth because he didn't want to step on ants. And Parvat Muni said, "Look at this. Here's a man that was ready to half kill animals. Now he doesn't want to harm an ant. Narada, you're really powerful." So it goes on and on. Narada's a very creative in how he does what he does. So we're going to hear tomorrow how he deals with the king. He's pious, but he's really attached. I mean, not like Magari, but he's really attached. And so he tells him a story about himself that's not about himself. It's just an allegory. Really long. Once upon a time, there was a king named Puranjana. Just happens to be you. But it's an allegory. And, everything was great except for one thing. I didn't have a queen. So he went searching for a queen, and it goes on and on and on. It's a very long story. We'll hear a nice story tomorrow. Hope there's some kids in the audience tomorrow, because it's a nice story. Very, very fascinating. And then after telling the whole story, he said, "Now I'll tell you the meaning of the story. You're Puranjan. A soul that wants to be the enjoyer. But to be the enjoyer, you need material intelligence." That's why he was searching for the queen. He saw her. It's like a whole story. So that's coming attractions. Stay tuned for the Puranjana story. And I think there are 2 articles that were written in Back to Godhead by really gifted writers, and we'll make them available. I just made it available while I was sitting here before the class. From Back to Godhead on the Puranjana story. And some nice graphics. I'm looking forward to discussing the Puranjana story. Who's our host tomorrow? Oh, okay. Okay. It's a nice story for newer people. You have something you want to ask a question there?
Yeah. Why did King Vena kill two children?
Because he was a madman. I mean, even when he was little, he was a madman. He was wicked and cruel. It was fun. He did it because it was fun. He was having a good time killing kids. And not a good person to play with. But that's why he did it. He was just cruel. It gave him satisfaction. Watch out for Vena in the schoolyard. Okay. Anything else? Over here.
Maharaj, how long Maharaj Prithu was on this earth?
How long was Prithu on the earth? I don't know the number of years. It gives the number of years for Dhruva, but not for Prithu. Doesn't give the number of years.
I have one more question, Maharaj. So the Sanskrit name of the earth is Prithvi, right? So is that
One of the names, yeah.
is that came from Maharaj Prithu?
Is the Sanskrit, is the dhatu similar? Is that what you're asking? The etymological root similar?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. I'm pretty useless this evening. I don't. It would seem like, but I can ask some Sanskrit scholars. They'll tell me quickly. I can't send. I don't know anyone that I could send a text message to right now and get the answer. But I'll do it tonight when I get back, and we'll send you the answer.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Anything online yet? Nothing yet. Okay, you, the audience here, you're on the hot seat. If there's nothing to discuss, we'll just move along. And generally, it takes people that are your viewers online a little while to send a text message in.
She wants to ask after the.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
The Venu's father, he was a pious person.
He was pious.
Right? And he did something in his previous life,
Yeah.
like some sinful activities. That why he didn't had a son.
That's correct.
But he did sinful activity, but in the next life, how he get a pious?
How was what?
He get a pious.
You want to know what
nature.
impious thing he did?
And even though he did impious, in the next life, why he is pious? He's
You
a
understand her question?
he's a good guy in next life.
He did faithful in the previous life, but in this life he was doing
Good.
Well, if you do something, misdeeds don't immediately fructify. karma can be instant or delayed. So good deeds don't immediately bring good results, although they may, and they may bring long-term results. And bad activities may bring immediately some reaction, or, in the next life, or 2 lives, or 3 lives later. The time sequence is not so rigid, it's very flexible. But something will come at some point in time, unless there's 2 options, unless there's some atonement, or unless there's devotional service that just wipes the slate clean. Prayeschita, you're familiar with that term? Atonement? You've heard of it. Yeah. So there's procedures in the Vedas. I mean, most religions have some method. For sin, you can atone for your sin. That kind of like wipe the slate clean for that particular sin, or sins of different traditions have different methods. So that's one way of counteracting a sin. But if you don't, it's going to come. Not necessarily in the very same lifetime you do something that's wrong or sinful or bad or hurtful to others, but it'll come. Law of nature. Pratibahu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I remember from this past time, it's either mentioned or Srila Prabhupada writes, I don't exactly remember, but he says that King Vena, he got his qualities from his mother, and his mother got his from her father, which was death personified. So does it mean that he got these bad qualities from his maternal grandfather?
It's not. It sounds like you're asking, is it A or B, and both are right. Like Ambarish, Prabhupada disciple Ambarish, was born in the family of Henry Ford. So the wealth came from Henry Ford. But he's not Henry Ford's son, he's his grandson. So it's from Henry Ford, through his father to him. You can say from his father to him. But it's from his grandfather to him. Both are right.
Another question is death personified same as Yamraj?
No, Mrityu. Remember when Ravana goes to the abode of Yamaraj and challenges him? There are 2 personalities who he meets. One is Yamaraj, Lord of Death, and the other is the Lord of Punishment, and Mrityu is there. There's 2 personalities, they're not the same. Now we're much more accustomed to hearing about Yamaraj, and much less accustomed to hearing about the personality of death, personified Mrityu. And it doesn't mention a lot here either, so I can't elaborate. I can spend some time and see though that's my second research work, some more information about Mrityu, death personified. But I'm familiar with that narration from Ramayana, and I know that they're 2 separate persons. Because death personified says, let me get him. Yamaraj says, no, let me do it. Then he's checked. Anyway. Because Yamaraj could have finished him, but then that would have violated, the benediction of Brahma. He can't be killed by a demigod. So he was told to stop.
First question is from Rama Raghava Prabhu. The example of Prithu Maharaj is of aspiring for something wholeheartedly and then giving it up on the instructions of spiritual master.
Yes.
It takes great devotion and surrender to do that.
Yes.
So my question is, was this instruction given to him just because Indra was scared of his own far-fetched speculation, or there was an indication from Prithu Maharaj of having an ambition to conquer the heaven?
No, it was just he's nervous. Prithu had no ambition to conquer Indra in heaven and become the king of heaven himself. He just gets nervous like that.
It's from Amara Mataji. How is sin characterized in the scriptures?
How is what?
Sin
Characterized?
in the scriptures. Is it the tendency to enjoy separately from Krishna? How does it manifest in devotees' life?
Well, that's not generally the way that sin is defined. Sin is generally defined as there's injunctions and there's prohibitions. Vidhis and nishetas, the do's and the do-nots. And the violating of the do-nots, that's sin. And how does it manifest in the life of devotees? There's do's and there's do-nots. Not abundant, but there's do's and do-nots.
Saying do's and do not, wouldn't you say that based on the do's and do nots that you're saying, technically wouldn't you say that every minute that you are spending not remembering Krishna, wouldn't that be a sin?
That's something else. I mean, it's not a sin per se. It's ignorance.
Ignorance.
When you ignoring Krishna is the root of ignorance.
Correct.
And when we ignore Krishna and we're covered by ignorance, then we're in Maya.
Correct.
Supposing now we're in Maya, then there's some do's and do-nots.
Because we're on this earth to pray, not for worldly objects, not for Maya, because Maya is an illusion, correct?
Maya is an illusion.
Correct.
But, so when we're in illusion, even in illusion, let's say, Prabhupada gives this example
Okay.
of Dharma, which has do's and do-nots, is like the laws of the state. So the law of the state says, keep to the right. And if you don't keep to the right, you're breaking the law.
Of course.
So that's the do not. Don't drive in the left, you drive in the right. That's the do with the injunction, there's a prohibition.
Prohibition.
So the do nots, even within the kingdom of Maya, is, you do this and you don't do that. You don't steal, you steal, and you're in the do not category.
Right.
So that's sin. So
Wouldn't you think that there's 4 qualities to make a person a true bhakta of Krishna? Like dharma would be one of them, bhakti, vairagya.
well, the true symptom is very simple.
Yeah.
The true symptom is take shelter of Krishna.
Right.
And one who has taken shelter of Krishna, Sharanam Braja, Mam Ekam Sharanam. You know the verse? Sarva Dharmam,
I don't know.
1866 Bhagavad Gita. Later
Okay.
you can look it up.
Yeah, okay.
Sarva Dharmam, all Dharma,
Dharma.
Prityaja.
Right.
Leave that to the side. Do one thing. Mam Ekam Sharanam. Surrender to me.
Surrender to me,
That's the Vaishnava principle. That's the Bhakti principle. You do that one thing, and Aham Tam Sarva Papebhyo. All sins, no worries.
Yeah. Right.
Krishna will do the course correction.
Of course.
You're surrendered to him, he'll correct you. So yet there are teachings like don't steal, don't lie, and so forth. Don't commit adultery, and some do's and those are. But one who is surrendered to Krishna is going to not do those things.
Okay. Now, according to this generation, this era, this new generation coming, how can we focus more on Krishna, especially with Kali going around and all sin going around us?
Your question is Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer.
Right.
Because what you just said is what Vyasadeva said. Wow, Kali Yuga is really bad.
Okay.
And each generation it gets darker and darker. What to do, which is your question.
Right.
It's not, the current generation is not a different light. The light of the Bhagavad is the light of the Bhagavad.
That's true.
I'm proof. It's not just, I'm a baby boomer guy, and there's the millennials, and they're different. It's a different light for the millennials. It's the same light.
Yeah, because a lot of things are day by day, things are changing. There's a lot more.
Principles don't change, though.
Yeah, that's true. Principles don't change. But also with this new generation, you're saying to read the Bhagavad, but this generation, people don't like to read.
Well, with a little hand holding, it happens. There are certainly persons that when the entry into the message of the I'll give a practical example. Here's a practical example.
Sure.
There's a class that's conducted for new people. Largely it's a Western audience, but not entirely. That's conducted out of New York City by two devotees. And they have it's early in the morning. It's for people that want to do that before they go to work. So it's like East Coast time. It's something like 6:30 in the morning or something like that. And they have like 3,000 people that listen to the class. Now, the ones that listen to it live are not 3,000, but they have some people in Europe and people all over the place.
Of course.
And it's new people, and they're just reading the Bhagavatam. But the way they discuss it is relatable for the younger generation
That's
people.
the right way of doing it, yeah. Makes sense.
That's one example.
Thank
there's,
you.
There's many. Okay, we're going to go back to that question of the do's and the don'ts. What does sin look like for contemporary Vaishnava? I think we touched on it. There are fundamental things that are not just intuitive, but they're explicit. And those fundamental things are the do-nots. And when you avoid the do-nots and you don't avoid the do-nots, then it's in the category of sin. And then you just departed from the position of a Vaishnav because you left Krishna's shelter. That's not a safe place. Anything else? Okay. In the room, anyone else? Otherwise, we're going to end. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.